Welcome to Business Talk with Meghan McNulty, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of business success and reveals the strategies, insights, and stories that drive these professionals to thrive in the ever-evolving world of business. Whether you're an established entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply fascinated by the world of commerce, this podcast is your front row seat to learn from the best. Each episode, Meghan will bring you engaging interviews with professionals from diverse industries who will share their triumphs, lessons learned, and the insights they've gained along the way. Welcome back to Business Talk, my podcast, where we explore how policy, business, and leadership intersect and what it means for innovation, advocacy, and opportunity in America. Today, we're heading to Iowa to talk with Joe Mitchell, a Republican running for Congress in the state's 2nd District, the seat currently held by Ashley Hinson. Did I say Ashley's name right? I think so. Joe made history a few years ago when he was elected to the Iowa House at just 21 years old. Since then, he served in the Iowa legislature, worked with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and launched a nonprofit to empower the next generation of conservative leaders. Now he's taking that experience to the national stage. So, Joe, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Meghan, good to be here. I'm in Iowa. It's about 28 degrees, so enjoy the weather in Newport.
Yeah, I'm not used to that kind of weather, so.
This is not the time of year to come to Iowa. I'll bring you out this spring.
Okay, well, I will be there in the spring then. So I guess this is the big question. Why now? Why are you running? Before, you've said too many Iowans have been left behind by the system that works for insiders and lobbyists. What does that mean to you? And what pushed you to jump into this race?
Well, Meghan, President Trump needs allies in Congress, and I'm going to stand behind the president. I worked for the president for 8 months prior to announcing my run for Congress. And ultimately, what I learned is that, you have to have people that are with the president to take down the DC establishment, to stand up to special interests, and make sure that we get big money out of politics. And so, the president has been the biggest champion for American workers in this country, including in Iowa, where he's made sure to protect our farmers and make sure that people's wages are going up and the grocery prices are coming down. And so ultimately, I want to stand side by side with the president to make sure that affordability is a top issue. And the president's done more on affordability than any other president in American history. And I want to be his ally in Congress to make sure that we're continually bringing down gas prices, grocery prices, mortgage prices, utility costs in this country. And so that's what our campaign is built on. And a few things, Meghan, when I announced this campaign, I said, we're not going to take corporate PAC checks. I said, we're going to have a term limits proposal, and we have to stop the stock trading that's happening in Congress right now. And that's important because we have to take down the establishment and business as usual that's been in DC for many years. And people get addicted to running for office, and they make a lot of money in Congress. You're only paid $175,000, but they come out millionaires. And I think we have to stop that environment and that culture that's been perpetrated for so many years. And so we're taking a stand. We're a new leader, a new generation that's going to be coming to Washington to say, hey, look, there's a new sheriff in town. That's President Trump. And we're going to stand side by side with them in Congress when we get elected.
I love it. Okay. So, I think you're young, right? You have lots of experience in politics and being doing service. What do you think makes you the right person for this right now to take on this challenge?
Well, Meghan, and you've heard me say this before, I'm 28, but I feel like I'm 50. Okay. I feel a lot older than I am. And that's because I've been blessed to do a lot of things in my life, including being in the legislature when I was 21 years old, the youngest state rep in the history of Iowa. But then, I've done real estate development for the last 5 years. So I've been on job sites, actually live in a home that I built here in Clear Lake. I live on my job site. I have, homes going up all around me that I'm building, which are workforce housing units that working class families can afford here in Iowa. And so I've had real life experience. I've ran my own business. I've had to balance my own budgets. But then I've also worked, for the president, as I mentioned, and I've started nonprofit organizations before and trade associations. So I've done a lot of things, and I like to think that I'm a productive person And so, I don't have a lot of hobbies. I don't necessarily golf or anything like that. What I do is try to add value to people's lives, and whether that's from building homes to building organizations and building trade associations. And so we've done all these things in just my 28 years on this earth. But I think the next mission that we want to complete is winning this race in Congress, but for people in Iowa and for the people of Northeast Iowa, which is the district I'm running for, Iowa's second congressional district. And so I think I'm very well prepared, more prepared than anybody else in the race to go to Washington and win, but also make a serious change that needs to be done as soon as possible.
Okay. So for our listeners who may not be familiar with Iowa's second district, which covers a big stretch of the Northeast.
Well, so it's Cedar Rapids. So Lynn County is the largest county in the district, and then there's Dubuque, and there's Waterloo, which is Blackhawk County, and then Cerro Gordo County, which is where I live, which is Clear Lake and Mason City. And so it stretches again across northern Iowa and northeast Iowa. And so we're covering all the counties, all 22 counties in the district. We've hit so far and talked at every single central committee and county fundraiser and everything that we can do to get out our message that we're the next generation that's going to lead, and we're the person that's going to fight for Iowans in Washington.
What are the top 3 issues you're hearing voters talk about in Iowa?
So I think the top 3 issues, number one, again, you got to talk about affordability, which the president's talked about a lot, and he's done more than anybody else on to bring down grocery prices, to bring down utility cost, energy cost. And so we're going to continue to talk about those issues too, because we need to make sure people know that the president and the Republicans in Congress are the ones that have been working on those issues, while the Democrats have been causing chaos, trying to cause the shutdown to last forever. And so we're going to talk about affordability. We're going to talk about home prices, because I'm a developer. I'm a housing developer, so I know more about development than anybody else in this race. And the president needs an ally in Congress that understands housing development and how to get housing costs down for Iowans. And we have to build more houses. You have to have a much greater supply of housing units that are in this country and in Iowa to make sure that those prices come down. So we're going to be committed to working with the president on our real life experience of actually getting housing prices down, driving down regulatory costs, and making sure the correct incentives are in place for developers to build real, affordable, attainable workforce housing. And then last but not least, Megan, we have to make sure that our farmers are protected here in the state. Obviously, Iowa is a big agriculture state, and the president's doing a lot to make sure that our farmers are getting free and fair trade. They were ripped off for a long time, and the president has done more than anybody else to make sure that our farmers are protected, and that's why they voted for him 3 times. And so we're focused on those 3 things right now. Things evolve during the campaign, so as things come up, we'll make sure to talk about pressing issues that are on Iowans' hearts and minds. But at the moment, I think we're winning. We're winning the race on a messaging standpoint, and people are energized, and they're pleased with my real life experience that I've had and what I've been able to do in just a few short years.
I think some people won't know. Doesn't Iowa feed most of the world?
Farmers, our farmers in Iowa feed a lot of the world, and a lot of our corn and soybeans go to feed for our cattle, for our beef, and for hogs, and all sorts of different livestock to be able to feed them, which then feed us. And then also half of our corn production goes to ethanol and to fuel the world as well. And so we feed the world, we fuel the world. That's what we say. And the president understands that, and he's the most popular president among the farmers that we've ever had. And I'm hoping to do something similar in Congress to make sure that we're protecting our farmers, and the ones here in Iowa specifically. And so I feel really good about our chances of winning, and a lot of that's going to be because we have a strong support sector from the ag people in our state, and many other people.
So you hear a lot right now about how millennials and the younger generations can't afford to buy houses in the United States, first time ever, that the younger generations are not doing as well as their parents have done. And so housing is a big is a big topic right now. So I'm just curious, you've served in the Iowa House and then later with HUD as a regional administrator overseeing several states. What lessons from those experiences will shape how you serve in Congress?
Well, it was a big reason why I ran, Megan, because I saw all the regulation that's at the federal government. And, you have 200,000 plus regulations just on the federal side. And that's ridiculous. And you realize that a lot of these regulations were actually passed by Congress and they've never been revised. They've never been repealed, and which is crazy to me. And so I think we have to have people like myself to understand regulations and red tape and compliance more than anybody else in the trades and building and development. And we have to go in and we have to make sure that we're doing things in a common sense way. I always say that it needs to be straightforward and simple when we look at a regulatory code. And so I'm going to go in there. We need to look at things like the National Environmental Protection Act, which, some things and some clauses in that act, we definitely need to, make sure we keep, but other things need to be revised. Things in SHPO, which is the State Historic Preservation Office, things in SHPO need to be revised. Things like Davis-Bacon in Section 3 that are requirements for HUD and for federal funds when you're doing certain projects, they needs to be looked at. So we need to look at a variety of things that have kept people from building and utilizing federal dollars to develop here in the United States. And I don't think we've had enough builders that have been in Congress that understand these issues. And so that's a big reason why I'm running, is because we have to build things in this country again. And when Wall Street is the only person or the only people that are making money and winning from the current economic system, that's not a winning economic system for working class people. So we have to make sure that we're building houses, we're building commercial buildings and industrial, and we have businesses moving in. And we only do that if we're able to revise and re-regulate our code, and look at our building codes and our energy codes and make sure that we're not requiring people to do things that are unnecessary. We want to make sure that people are building solid quality structures, but we need to make sure that it's done in an efficient and a manner that's cost efficient, and where people can build them and things that are affordable again. So that's where I'm going to go in with my real life experience, being a builder and a developer, understanding how to pencil deals out. And that's what I'm going to do in Congress. I'm going to look at regulations and say, if this makes it harder to build, we're not going to pass it. If this makes it more costly to build, we're not going to pass it. So you got to have people like me in Congress that understand the building codes and the energy codes and, what we're dealing with. And then you look at the FHA, HUD, and, FHFA, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which I worked at, and understanding the mortgage bond market and how we can utilize that to also open up affordable housing, attainable housing in this country.
Okay, so let's now switch gears to Run Gen Z. So you founded Run Gen Z. It's a nonprofit to recruit young conservatives into public service. How do you think generational leadership changes the tone or effectiveness of Congress? Right now, I'm not trying to be rude, but we have a lot of octogenarians there that have been there for, like Nancy Pelosi, 40 years.
Right.
So how do you think adding younger generations to Congress will affect the effectiveness of Congress for the American people?
Right. Well, we're hoping to bring down the average age of Congress of about 30 years. That's our plan right now. So if we get elected, that'll happen. But when I started Run Gen Z, I'd been elected to the state legislature at the age of 21. And then I went on to start this organization, help recruit young conservatives to run for state and local office. And I actually met somebody named Charlie Kirk. And Charlie gave me seed money to start Run Gen Z. I met Charlie September 10th, 2019. And shortly after meeting Charlie, he started inviting me to Turning Point events around the country. And then ultimately gave me $30,000 of seed money to hire my first staffer for Run Gen Z. And we partnered with Turning Point Action over a several year period. They still do work with Turning Point. Run Gen Z does quite often. That's where we get a lot of our students and candidates from, is working with Turning Point and finding these young people that love the country and that are patriotic and that want to run for office and make a difference. But the idea is we have all these young people that are excited about being a conservative, excited about being a capitalist, excited about the United States, and let's get them to run for school board and city council and state legislative seats across this country, and pair them up with a mentor, with somebody that's been elected, that's under the age of 30, that can relate with them and help them with their race. They don't need to hire some expensive consultant to help them with their race. They can do it themselves, with a little bit of help, and understand how to door knock and how to put a grassroots campaign together and that sort of thing. And so that's what we did. And, it took off, and we raised a lot of money for it. And I did everything voluntarily with the organization. Never took a salary from it, but raised a lot of money for it because it was the right thing to do. And so we've gotten hundreds of young people elected across this country because of Run Gen Z. And, some of the leaders of tomorrow, I call them, are going to be, future congressmen and U.S. senators and governors, because they started at Run Gen Z, and we were able to find them young and help them, with their pathway to public service.
It's amazing. It's a wonderful organization. I would like to now talk about lobbying, legislation, and transparency, because we hear a lot of people kind of, not say nice things about lobbyists, even though they're actually really helpful. From my, medical device background, I would say that lobbyists are kind of like medical device sales reps. Basically, medical device sales reps go in and they educate doctors on the latest technology, new techniques, basically what's coming out as things change and innovation changes. So I believe that lobbyists do a really good job, bringing information to lawmakers and policy experts to, educate them on what they should be, implementing or voting for. So I just would like to hear kind of your thoughts on, being a lawmaker and the lobbying side of the, business no one really talks about, or if they do talk about it, they sometimes have negative things to say.
Right. Well, Megan, I was in the state legislature for 4 years, and then I came out of the legislature and I started something called the Iowa Real Estate Developers Association, with the
Okay.
purpose of advocating on behalf of real estate developers in our state. So we had the largest developers in our state join that organization, give seed money, and we had to hire lobbyists. And I was the executive director and the chairman, the president of the organization. Started the PAC. We had one of the highest and top PACs in the state, well-funded PACs in the state. And so ultimately, there's good lobbyists, there's bad lobbyists, right? Like any other profession, but you have to read through the lines. And Megan, I know you do a good job. You're one of the good ones, right? But also, you have to make sure you're using discernment. And, the best lobbyists are the ones that give both sides and that say, hey, here's where our points are. But here's what the other side's going to say. Here's what their valid points are, but here's where ours are better. And so, ultimately in Washington, I dealt with this as well, at the Federal Housing Finance Agency, is you have to see both sides of the story. A lot of times the lobbyists don't say both sides of the story. And when they're employed by these huge, gigantic companies, multinational billion-dollar conglomerates, you have to be very careful about what they're saying, the statistics that they're bringing to the table, because a lot of times they fund studies. A lot of times they're funneling money to different research institutions, which are going to, be a little lopsided on what their results find and those sort of things. So, I would just say as a lawmaker, you're going to use discernment, but I'm somebody also who created a trade association to advocate for my industry. And so you have to advocate for your industry. You have to advocate for, what other profession you may be in, because government is involved in every aspect of your life, whether you like it or not. If you're a teacher, if you're an attorney, if you're a developer, if you're a farmer, the government is involved. So you got to have good people representing you at the state capitol, on the local level, and at the federal level to make sure that, the government isn't doing things, which they like to do, that are meddling with your livelihood.
Right. So one of the fastest growing industries right now in the United States is actually the medical spa industry, and that's broad, but it includes everything from aesthetics to IV therapy to, administering peptides and doing blood work for healthcare and, longevity, biohacking. What's your thoughts on that? And how do we prevent it from being overregulated? Because it's so new that the regulations haven't started yet. Do you have an opinion about that?
Yeah, I think you always have to be cautious in any industry of overregulating it, because people always have a reason why this pertains to safety for some reason or another. And so you have to just make sure that you're maintaining a balance between safety and liberty. And if you go too far on the safety side, then you won't have the liberty. And so I tend to always like decide with the liberty side to make sure that we can keep more of our freedom and more of our liberty, and make sure that we can do what we want to do, and we can make those choices of where to go and where not to go. And so I believe in the market, in the free market, and people can if there's certain places that are bad actors, people won't go there anymore. And with the internet today, and with Yelp and with Google and all these other sites that you can put all these reviews on, if you're a business that's a bad actor, you're going to get taken out pretty quickly by the free market, and people are going to write bad things, and you're not going to get business. So, ultimately, I always like to decide on, be cautious on, passing new regulatory. And then also, when you look at it, you have to make sure, is this a state issue, a federal issue? Is this a local issue? Because sometimes people bring up issues that really shouldn't be passed at the federal or state level. It should be a local issue, which is where I think, most decisions should be made, is on the local level. And they want federal government or state government to do things. And I just think that we need to make sure that we're really looking at things in the way of, how could this potentially be harmful to an industry, to a business, to an employee, and really stifle job growth, economic growth, and people to be able to do what they want to do and create a livelihood.
I like that. I agree. A lot of maybe some of the listeners don't realize, but again, just to repeat, I know I've said it in some other episodes I've done, but there's legislation happening at the state and local level, and then also at Congress, where, Joe's running to be a congressman from Iowa, where they make rules at the federal level in DC. So I guess a question is, some listeners might not realize how much federal agencies such as FDA, FTC, or CMS shape daily business operations. If elected, how will you ensure those agencies are accountable to both businesses and the public?
Well, like I said before, we have to look at a regulatory code, the 200,000 plus regulations that we have here on the federal level in the United States, and we have to start repealing things very quickly. We need to revise certain regulatory codes that have been put in place. And I just know a lot about HUD and about the Federal Housing Finance Agency and the development sector. But when you start looking at things at USDA and FDA and the Federal Trade Commission, as you said, it's everywhere. We've overregulated almost every industry, in this country. And so we have to look at revising and repealing these regulations, because the administration can only do so much. And when you get a new administration in, they can put those regulations right back on. And so Congress, is actually the ones that passed, most of these regulations on the books. And so we have to start reviewing statute and, repealing, certain regulations that we put in place, 40, 50, 60 years ago that are maybe outdated, and, that we moved past, and those sort of things. So, I think, that's going to be a really, strong interest of mine when I get elected to Congress, is making sure that we're not overregulating our businesses, specifically small businesses here in the country.
Can you let's go circle back to Iowa. So what do you think, I know we mentioned this briefly, but what do you think Iowans are most concerned about for their state, and what do they want someone like you to fight for them in Congress? Would it be, the ability for water? I don't know. California is the big things like water rights. We want our Congress to make sure we have water rights. Our congressmen and women fighting for California to have water rights. What do you think Iowa they're concerned about?
Well, Iowans are like a lot of other people. They're like other Americans. They want to make sure that their children can achieve the American dream, that they can afford a home someday. They want to make sure that grocery prices are stabilized and utility prices come down, that they can afford, their car payments and their cell phone payments every night. And then they can also, send their kids to college if they wish to do so. So that's what we're focused on. Again, we're going to be focused on affordability, and the president is focused on that. And again, he's done so much, and just in the last 10 months to bring down cost. When there was Bidenflation, and the president, the prior administration and President Biden, they had rampant inflation and costs were going up like crazy. And so now you're seeing those costs and those trends flatline, which is good. And the next step is to actually bring those costs down, what the president is doing. So we're focused on that as well. And, that's what we're running this campaign on. It's pretty basic, but it means a lot to people. And, it's all about the economy. And that's what people care about at the end of the day, is they care about the economy, what's happening with the economy. And so that's what we're going to be focused on. And I think it's going to be a winning message.
You might not have an answer for this, but President Trump just said he might support the 50-year mortgage. And I don't know a lot about that. Do you have any thoughts about that, in order to get younger people into homes, so their payments aren't as high? It's kind of an economics question, but I thought that was.
Yeah, I think we need to have as many
Yeah.
tools in our toolbox as possible. I think I would like to look at assumable mortgages. So say you have a 3% mortgage on your home, 30-year fix. And if you wish to move, somebody else can come to your house and take over your mortgage. And right now you can't do that. And so I think that would be probably the biggest tool that we could utilize from the mortgage aspect. But then you also have to make sure that we're building up supply in this country. And so we have a massive deficit of millions and millions of single family homes and multifamily units that aren't built in this country. And so you have to incentivize developers to build. And, that's a combination of deregulation, rezoning, but also financial incentives for developers to build real affordable housing. And right now, what we've done on the federal level since 1986, when they passed the low-income housing tax credit, it's been a disaster. And the compliance is so cumbersome. Normal people can't access light tech. It's too much paperwork, it's too much compliance, too much cost. And then they build these incredibly inefficient units. And, we have a variety of programs in Iowa that we've used to build workforce housing and attainable housing that's much more straightforward and simple to use. And so I want Washington to look a little bit more like Iowa in the way that we do things. And if we can do that sooner rather than later, we'll fix these problems.
I hope so. So it takes a lot to run for the United States Congress. You have a primary coming up. When is your primary?
So our primary is June 2nd. So just, in about, 6 or 7 months from now, but it's June 2nd and we need everyone's support. So our website is joemitchell.com, and people can go on there to support me, at our website and give to our Win Red link. But we'd love to have everyone's support, for this race. And, we're going to be representing, Iowa Congressional District 2, but we're going to be fighting for freedom for all Americans.
For those that, again, people might not know, how much money does it take to actually run a primary in the United States for the United States?
Too much money. Too much money is the answer, Megan. But we're going to have to raise about 1.3 million for the primary raise, which we've already raised over $500,000. We've raised more than anybody else in the state of Iowa for a race like this in our first quarter. And then we're going to have to raise another 3 million for the general election to beat our radical left opponent that we're going to have. So
3 million?
3 million in the general election. Yeah.
Wow. So that's going to be basically June to November of next year.
Yes. Yep.
So it'll be a grind. Wow. I don't think people realize how much money is involved in going after this. So that's incredible. Okay. So everyone heard that. Next question for you is basically, I have a personal question. What keeps you motivated?
Keeps me motivated. I think what keeps me motivated is the people of this district. I go around every day and I meet people. I was just at a Veterans Day event earlier in Mason City talking to veterans in this district. And I think when I meet people that have served this country, when I meet people that have built businesses and they've achieved the American dream, they give me hope, and they give me the stamina and the energy every day to wake up and come out here and fight for them and fight for their families. And so, ultimately that's what keeps me motivated, is the people of Iowa Congressional District 2 in Northeast Iowa that are out here, building their lives. And, they know that Washington's broken. And, I want to make sure that I'm a representative for them in DC and not for the insiders, not for the establishment.
Love it. Okay. So when you get to Congress, what's the first committee you want to be on and why?
Oh, probably Ways and Means. I served as the vice chair of Ways and Means in the State House or House Financial Services, one or the other, because I want to deal with tax policy, and again, incentivize good actors. We want to incentivize people to build things. We want to incentivize companies to grow jobs here and, grow their, economic development in the United States, not elsewhere. We don't want people offshoring jobs. That's a big no-no. And so I want to make sure that our tax code reflects investment here in America and not in foreign countries. And so we're going to reward American companies that keep their jobs here and reshore their jobs, by the way, and don't send them to Mexico and to China and to other places around the world where we have for many decades. And so I would really want to reflect what the president's done with tariffs, but into the tax code to make sure that we're incentivizing companies to build here and bring jobs back to the United States.
Wonderful. Can you tell us again how we learn more about you and your campaign?
Yeah, so that you guys can go to joemitchell.com. That's our website, or go to our Twitter or our X and our Facebook pages, Joe Mitchell for Congress or Joe Mitchell for Iowa. And we'd love to have everybody's support. And we'd love for you to follow our campaign and help us win this election.
Joe, thank you for joining me today. It's been great hearing more about your background, your vision for Iowa's 2nd district. And for those of you that, don't understand, these campaigns and runs for Congress take a lot of money. So if you're so inclined, please donate what you can. And anything else you would like to add, Joe?
No, I appreciate you having me on, Megan. And you've been a great friend in Newport, and I love Newport. I love it a lot. I don't love it as much as Iowa, unfortunately, but good to see you, and thanks for having us on today.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to the Business Talk podcast and leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us grow and improve. Thank you for joining us today. This has been another episode of Business Talk with Meghan McNulty.